The reality is like we do that by examining what we've held on to over the span of our lives, and what we've believed to be true, what we've observed to be true might be two different things.
Welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast, where we talk about everything from spirituality, self-development, relationships, mindfulness, wellness, and everything that will help you embrace all that you are so you can expand into the best version of yourself. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. So our guest on this episode, I recently met through an online workshop all about the power of your words and breath. She has been in the coaching and fitness space for the last 6 years, working with all types of clients on holistic wellness. She began to notice one common theme that all of her clients needed help with: mindset. The host of Get Enlifted podcast and head of growth for Enlifted, she is on a mission to spread the Enlifted tools across the globe to help coaches unlock their clients' full potential while yielding lasting results. So let me introduce you to Kimberly Kesting. Kimberly, welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast.
Hey, everybody. What a great introduction. Thank you, Adam. It's fun to hear other people read that.
It's always good to get that reflection, right, of how people see you.
Yeah, yeah. And like you hear, like I host my own podcast. And so when I have guests on and I talk about them, I'm like, I know how good it feels on the other side. So I like being on the other side of the mic.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, so those of our listeners that aren't maybe familiar with you or aren't familiar with Enlifted, why don't you go ahead and just take a few moments to kind of tell us about yourself and your path that got you here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Enlifted is a mindset coaching methodology, and we offer training for coaches and people who want to improve their mindset through a lens that is very unique and different compared to what other mindset coaching programs may offer or present. And the unique mechanism that we're looking at is words and breath, as you mentioned. So we take a deep dive look into language and language patterns and how they can create ambiguity, indecision, stuckness, victim mentality. We'll get back to that in a second, and really keep people focused on all the things that they don't want, keep them pushing themselves in the direction of the things that are no longer serving them. And then all by looking at the words. We're not telling people what to do. We're not trying to cheer them up. We're not trying to get them to think a certain way. By looking at the exact words that they're thinking, speaking, and writing, we can deconstruct those language patterns of what we call conflict language and then translate it into another perspective. And so, without getting into too many of the details or the weeds of it, we're really looking at how the words are influencing our feelings and emotions, our imagination, our posture, our breathing, and how that is creating what we call mindset, right? Which we define as the story you tell yourself to yourself. And when most people talk about mindset, it's this: we all get that it's important. We all understand that how we view ourselves and how we think and feel and write and how we act in the world is a product of what goes on in our heads. And yet most mindset coaching programs or most mindset methodologies miss the mark on how to actually do that, right? The practical nature of it. So with Enlifted, we take mindset, we chunk it down to the words, and we're able to tell a much different story and have a totally new perspective, almost instantaneous change in how we're seeing a situation. And you got to experience it in the workshop, so I'm sure you have something to say about it too, which is that these shifts are almost instantaneous, which is why I love this methodology and why I found it to be so essential in using it with my health coaching and fitness clients, because they ultimately, I could try to cheer them up. I could try to motivate them. I could try to get them to take action in the direction of where they wanted to go. But as long as they were telling themselves a story about they can't or why they shouldn't or why it's never going to work out, and that internal dialogue was running amok, I was never going to be able to get the results for them or help them get the results for themselves. So I learned this methodology, became completely fiend for it. And Mark England and Adam Chin, who are the co-founders of the company, I started working with them closely, and then they brought me on board as part of the team. And the past 2.5 years, we've been really driving this business to expand out to as many coaches as we can, and really like just taking the mindset industry by storm, because we know that the value that we offer is so needed in this world. And when people get the chance to interact with the material, it becomes obvious how essential it is for coaching, how essential it is for operating in your own life, becoming more resilient, becoming happier, and what we call more enlifted. So here we are.
Mhm. It's such a wonderful way that you explain it and the way that you put it, because you are right. It is instantaneous. Not only when you can change the words that you are using within the description of a certain event and a certain story to something that's more empowering, something that is, at least for me, so the example that we went through in the workshop where I kind of got up in front of everybody and read a story was really reframing it instead of putting the blame on myself that I had done something wrong in that event, recognizing that no, it was actually the other person projecting onto me what they were feeling. And so I immediately was able to shift my mindset from a place of blame, of regret, of feeling like I was unworthy, to empathy, compassion, and grace, to recognize that, oh, I actually had no fault in that instance whatsoever, but I took the fault on as my own and have carried it from when I was 8 years old all the way till now as 38 years old. So 30 years worth of feeling like I was in the wrong in that situation, to now drastically shift that and then be given the gift of putting myself in a situation recently, being around that person again, and having the energy in that relationship totally change.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, um, it's profound. And the way, like I came about this work first as a student, which was I was health coaching. I was working with women primarily around weight loss and confidence and being able to really shift their relationship with themselves. And I kept coming up against the same stories of shame and guilt and regret. And much like what you just described, right? It's this like putting all the blame on ourselves. And why can't I figure this out? Why has anything worked before? Why can't I get the results I want? I'm never going to be able to achieve this. I'm always destined to feel this way. And I kept coming up against the same stories. And eventually, what I realized was like those stories were also existing in my life. Like I was also in that place of, this is the way we technically classify it is the victim mentality, which is that everything is outside of our own control and that we're disempowered and feeling very much like we are the in the definition we say it this way is like the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence, which means that they're not actually doing anything to us but that we are experiencing it as if we are um the at the brunt of their experience. And so like it's like that universal they, like they don't want me to succeed. Well, who's they, and then we look at like how the habitual thought process that you continuously repattern into your brain over many experiences and over many reps of saying the same thing the same way puts you in this disempowered state and creates that victim mentality, which means that like I don't have any agency or control over things in my own life and that this is just the way it is. This is how it's always going to be. And what can I do about it? And when we say it like that, like, what can I do about it? Well, that's like presupposing that we can't. It like is like throw your hands up in the air and like, what could I possibly do about this? But if we say it differently, we say, what can I do about it? Now I can start to look for answers. I can start to look at what, like, literally, what could I do? Can I put a list down? And so when I was in this stage of working with clients where the pity party and the disempowered state of like desperately wanting to change and wanting a different outcome, but really putting themselves in a position that was all in their own head. And again, I parallel this in my own life. I realized like I was having the same type of thoughts, maybe not around the thing I was coaching, which like I had figured out, but I was feeling these disempowered thoughts in business. I was feeling the disempowered thoughts in relationships. I was feeling like how am I ever going to make this thing work? And so I was familiar with Mark's work because I met him through another mentor of mine and I had become friends with him. And I observed something very different about him than other people, which was that he was very committed, very determined, very focused, very clear, very direct, and that he made shit happen. So I was like, what is this guy doing that's different than what everyone else is doing? Because his experience being around him and observing him and watching him is totally different than how other people interact and behave. So I started to learn from him and I started to take more attention towards my words and language. Eventually, I took the coaching certification with Enlifted, and it blew my head wide open because I realized how much like I love to write, I love to think, I'm a deep thinker, I love to talk, I love to communicate, and I love words. And he taught me an entirely new angle on them that I had never considered before. And what I loved about it was like the system was very mathematical in a sense, right? Because it was like there was direct translations, there was direct swaps of ways to look at and analyze the language patterns and realize, like much like what you were talking about, where it's another person projecting onto me, or of course I'm feeling and thinking this way because look at how the words are structured, and that's going to put my attention right here. And so when I learned the system, it became this revolution in my own life because I realized all the places that I had been completely unintentionally, unknowingly placing myself in that victim mentality and acting like I couldn't do anything about all the stuff that I wanted to change and go after in my life. And then I realized, oh my God, this is the exact same thing my clients are experiencing. And I'm trying to explain to them, I'm trying to explain them out of it. I'm trying to motivate them out of it. I'm trying to educate them out of it. And that doesn't work because they're still using the same thought, still using the same language to describe the problem. And so I started coaching with the Enlifted method, and it was unbelievable how much faster, quicker, more direct, more enjoyable my coaching interactions became and how much quicker my clients got results. So as I like really committed myself to the work and got really a lot more interested in utilizing it is when I started to Mark knew that I had done some work with his friend who was my other mentor around marketing and building an online coaching business. And he asked me to support and see what I could do to help grow Enlifted. And then eventually it turned into me creating my own job into a full-time position into like now I'm a core piece of the team. And it's really rewarding to me because I know the experience that coaches are in that they're up against where they're trying to make progress with clients. And without this tool, without understanding how, like even if you have a background in psychology, even if you have a background in trauma, even if you have a background in like understanding human behavior and change management, nothing that I have studied before this got as direct to the point as what it is when we look at the words, because it's the words are the answer. I don't know how to say it any other way. It's like it's the answer. So yeah, I'm really grateful that I get to teach this skill to others coaches and share it and expand out to as many people as we can because it really is something that once you become aware of it, once you can put your attention there, once you commit to practicing it, is going to dramatically shift the way you view yourself and how you show up in the world and how you act and behave. So it's a really, really gratifying place to be, and it's also fun. So I could talk about it forever.
Well, it's definitely it's very, very apparent, just like you said, when you were around Mark, when you're around yourself, the level of integrity, but the level of true and utter belief that goes into this system is proven within just a matter of moments listening to how you guys talk about this method. And I think it is really, really important. And even just going through the workshop, like I've implemented a lot of things that you guys use within the Enlifted coaching in my own program, and especially being very much a breath worker and spending the last year training in breath work. Like how you are breathing is how you are living. So trying to remember that. But when you couple the breath with the words that you use and recognizing how the words you use change how you are breathing, that was something that I hadn't put together quite yet. And so being able to put
Yeah.
together those two pieces, and then even recently working with some of my coaching clients on calls, I am now more aware of the words that they are using when they are telling me the things that they are going through and the things that they are dealing with. And immediately I'm like, okay, hold on, let's take a pause for a second. Let's unpack those words that you're using and that sentence that you just said, because I very much believe that, we have the physical body that we have to take care of. We have the emotional body that we have to take care of. We have the mental body we have to take care of, and we have the spiritual body we have to take care of. And a lot of us are really focused on that physical body and what we put into that body. But we don't, I shouldn't say we don't. Many of the times, many of us forget that what we are feeding ourselves, both internally from the stories that we replay within our mind and the words that we use every single day, is no different than the food that we put in our body or the water that we drink. It's all information for our body. It's all information for our cells. And our bodies are 70 to 80% water. And as a lot of research has shown, water molecules change with the words that you use and the energy behind that. So if we're constantly replaying these
Yes.
stories and patterns that I am not worthy, I am not good enough, I can't do this, our cells are like, okay, buddy, you just gave me the programming that I need to keep replicating within your body that is going to continue to tell every single one of the trillions of cells in your body that this is what is true. And I have my
Yeah.
notes from that workshop, and one of the first sentences that Mark said was, "How will I ever make this happen?" And when you say that, it feels in the body very disempowering. It feels like, ugh, how am I ever going to make this happen? But if I just remove one word out of that sentence, ever. So now it reads, how will I make this happen? You can hear the inflection difference in my voice of, okay, it's more of a question now. How will I make this happen? And now if I take out two more words, how and will, I make this happen. And that again completely
Abracadabra.
changes it. And yes, please tell our listeners the importance of that word, abracadabra. It's not just some magic
Yeah,
word.
absolutely. It is the magic word. And abracadabra quite literally translates to with my word I create or with my word I influence. It's Aramaic. It's one of the oldest words that recognize it's one of the most widely recognized words on the planet. I would venture to guess that regardless of where you are in the world, whatever language the people are speaking, if you say the word abracadabra, people will know what you mean. They understand magic. And there's a couple other keywords here that are important to bring to the table, which is magic itself is the apparent ability to influence, right? So it's not that it is the ability to do it, it's the apparent ability to do it, right? The perceived ability to do it. And then another one is a spell. A spell is a combination of words of great influence. So if we look at all three of those things and we see abracadabra with my word I create, magic, the apparent ability to influence, and then a spell, a word or phrase of great influence, magic is completely dependent on the words in which we utilize. And so, this idea of looking at how our language is influencing how we show up in the world, how we act, how we behave, how we breathe, how we take action or not, it's at the core of our being. And I love that you bring up the example of water and food because yes, like that is speaking my language. The thing that, you know, a lot of people to make the analogy for people who are in health coaching or wellness coaching and looking at this as a more holistic lens or avenue, it is very apparent and obvious that what we put into our body matters, right? What we put on our body matters, the information that we take in. So if we look at the physical body as the hardware, and then we look at the language as the software that's going on in our head, we can change that, right? We can get software updates and we can either run like Windows 98 and always believe the stories from our past and always be stuck in this past version of ourselves and never try to update or never try to think differently. Or we can run the latest version of iOS and we can be at the cutting edge of how we want to think, how we want to act, how we want to feel, all by using the language in our own head. So that information experience, right? It's do I have the right like you hear people talk in a spiritual community all the time about oh my programming. Well, okay, what is your programming? It's the words. It's the words and the stories that you're telling yourself and it's the way that your nervous system is holding on to that trapped story about what this means about you and why you are the way you are. And the way to unravel that is words and breath. The way it got in there was words and breath in the first place. So the way to get it out is also words and breath. The way to translate it is words and breath. The way to update the software is words and breath. And so a lot of us think like from a lens of this is why this work is so critical in health coaching. It's why it's really also critical in every other style of coaching, which is that we have to update the software. If we want to do something different, we want to act differently, we want to see ourselves differently, we want to behave differently in the world, we have to update the software. You can't, you're just not going to be able to make it happen on the Windows 98 anymore. Like it's not the world we live in. It's not how this thing works. And you can't stay stuck in the past. We've got to be able to move forward and take ownership, like iterate on each version of it and make sure that we get each update along the way. And the reality is like we do that by examining what we've held on to over the span of our lives and what we've believed to be true, what we've observed to be true might be two different things. So yeah, it's a very interesting analogy to when we look at it like that, because I think people really get it, right? If you're operating like, an old version of an iPhone, it doesn't do things as quickly and as fast as a new version with a new software update. And so you can look at yourself in a very similar way and say like, okay, cool. Like, what can I do to improve my mental fitness? What can I do to improve my mental health, optimize my mental health? This. It's like that is the answer. This.
We're in so much resonance because that is an analogy that I have used pretty much ever since I started becoming a coach. And I always use iOS, but I call it the internal operating system because that's exactly what it
I like
is.
that.
So it's like we are just like an iPhone. We have apps, we have our internal operating system, and that internal operating system dictates how those apps run. And those apps are our stories. And we can choose to carry a lot of old stories that are just going to take up more information and more space, or we can delete some of the old apps, some of those old stories, download new ones, which is a very common term used in the spiritual community of like, I received a download.
Yeah.
Okay,
True.
but if
Oh
you
my God.
receive the
Downloads. Wow.
download, but you don't actually install the download because there is not enough space left on the hard drive within inside your own device, and there is not a reboot that happens with your iOS, that download can't actually operate. You may only be operating from a percentage of that download. So I really love this integration fact of looking at the stories that you're listening to inside of your body, because our physical body, our cells, our mind don't understand the difference between something that is believed to be true versus something that is physically true. They are one in and of the same. So if we're always telling ourselves we can't do something because we've maybe only tried it once and we weren't able to do it 5 years ago, but we're a completely different person now than we were 5 years ago. But if you're still not allowing yourself to try that thing again because you believe you can't do it, well, changing can't to can and believing that to be true is what is actually going to make that be a reality. But as long as you believe you can't, you of course can't.
Right. So this is the thing that I think about a lot, which is, um, there's like the platitudes of what it is to say like change can't to can or have to get to. And those are great. Like those changes are great because it gives you that like the context switch. And it's not enough. Like the truth is it's not enough because we can't just believe it just because we change one word. And so you see this in memes on Instagram, you see this in motivational quotes and speeches. You see this when people who are trying to uh, you know, motivate you into making that change or believing it to be different. And the truth is that's not like, yes, you can listen to a lot of that stuff and it may help and it may move you forward and it may put you in position to make some bigger moves. The truth is we have to get deeper to the root. So the way I like to look at this is like having the conversation about identity and then also having the conversation about really going through the past stories and understanding what did that mean about me, which forms the identity. And so if we look at a statement like, we'll go with one, I'll make it up along the way and we'll be able to see, like, trace this so you guys can understand as you're listening what I mean by going deeper, which is that, like, I can't, um, I can't lose weight. Okay. Easy one from my health coaching background. It's like, and it's very visual, like people understand that. And we could say can't to can. And we could say I can lose weight. And I can say that, but I may not believe it. So we're talking about believability factor here, which is essential. So if my identity is that I'm always destined to be fat, that I'm never going to have a fit, strong, lean body, and that that like no matter what I do, if I change that one word and just say I can lose weight, I likely the likelihood of that believability factor being high and being accepted by me is slim to none. No pun intended. Because why? Because I've had stories throughout my entire life. I've had experiences and memories that have reinforced the belief that I can't lose weight because I've tried all these things in the past, because I've never been successful before, because everything I try ends up in failure, because da 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 da. I could go on forever. So the believability factor, just purely by changing that one word, does not get the result that I need. So the surface level change is a starting point. What I really need to do is go back and dig back and understand how many stories, how many experiences do I have where I'm giving myself the evidence that that first statement is true. The reticular activating system, which is essentially a search and edit function in our brain, which takes a look for we prime it with something and then we find evidence for that. And so if I've gone through my whole life believing I can't lose weight, I have a laundry list of evidence for proof. And when I look at the statement I can lose weight, I likely have no evidence for that to be true. Maybe I have some, but I've edited it out. I've used that reticular activating system to point and reinforce my first belief. So what we do with the Enlifted method is we go back and we dig deeper and we understand, where did this story form? Where did this belief form? And how did it get there? What did it mean about me when this instance happened? And then when we look back and we can see, we can clean out the stuff, the evidence that's reinforcing the first belief. And we can start to search and edit and find the evidence that, well, yeah, you know what? Actually, when I was consistent with weightlifting for 6 months, I did lose 10 pounds. And you know what? I felt great. And then I gained it back because I stopped. So it wasn't that I couldn't lose weight. It was I did do it, but I wasn't consistent. Right. And then it's like, and actually, you know what? You're right. Like when I really committed to eating whole foods and drinking clean water, I lost another 10 pounds there, but then I gained it back because I started drinking soda again. Like it's like these things that we're not even giving ourselves credit for because we're just believing the first thought that pops into our head. And so that surface level translation, to bring it back up to that, why I call it a platitude, it's like being like it's true. It's great. It's a great starting point. And the truth is that one word change, yes, I can see how the imagery changes in my head. I can see how the feeling changes in my body, and it will not stick unless I have that deeper dive, that deeper understanding of where the root of the belief comes from. And this is where, like it's challenging to go into those past memories and stories. It's emotional to go into those past memories and stories. We've stuffed them down for a reason because we no longer want to feel or experience that thing. So what has to happen is we've got to go in there, we've got to dig them up, and we've got to clear them out. And so that means we're going to experience emotions again. That means we're going to have to look in some dark corners of ourselves of where we would rather not look. And the truth is that it's like it burns going in, it burns going out, it hurts both ways. And the freedom and the relief, the space that we create from it by going into that stuck spot is what creates the room for that believability factor to go all the way up. So, like, if I use that example I just shared, if we found those two stories where I was able to make progress and I did know, well, what worked? Oh, it was when I was eating whole foods and when I was strength training. Now I can put my client in a position to say, well, it worked before. I did do this. Like I celebrate that. I did do it. And fine, yeah, there's all these other things and all these other times where I was highly emotionalized and this is why this happened. But you know what? Actually, if I do these two things, I can set myself up to be action prone. I can say, this is where I want to go. Oh, okay, cool. I did it before. And here's how I do it again. I can then put myself in position to make the progress to get that believability factor up and then say, like, oh, okay, you know what? Yeah, I can lose weight. I'm doing it. I've done it before. It becomes a new story and a new belief that I can install. But without that, like cleaning house of the other stuff that's keeping me stuck, uh, changing one word or changing the like, oh, oh man, I have to go do my laundry to I get to go do my laundry. it falls flat, you know,
Mhm.
because it's like, oh, it's stupid. Like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever. And that's why a lot of people, like, you know, they'll post about it, they'll share about it, you'll hear the motivational speeches, but that's where it ends. It's just okay, they said that, and that's what I got to do. But you know what? Screw it. I'm not actually going to do it. Why? Because there's more deeply rooted programming than simply that one sentence. And so a lot of like that work of knowing how to go into those deeper rooted stuff, that's where the Enlifted method can solve for many coaches, because there's a lot, there are techniques and tools to go into that. This one in particular is incredibly simple and straightforward and clear, and you know where you're going, your client will know where you're going, it'll be clear the entire time. It will create like that's why we use the word clarity so often, is because you can really get super crystal clear about what's going on when you get the words on paper, when you take the time to slow down, when you look specifically at what is this image that's popping into my head, how's my breathing interaction with this, how am I feeling, where in my body is it stuck, like being able to tie together all of those things by using the lens of language is where people can really, really, really make some massive headway and start to put themselves in position to take action. And so that's a long-winded way of saying, like, the words themselves are one building block of the puzzle. There's also then the words that create the story, which creates the identity, right? To bring us back to where I started, is looking at it through the lens of identity. Words create stories, stories create identity, and the identity gets reinforced every time you rep the same sentences and the same thoughts and the same then actions, behaviors. So yeah, long-winded answer on that one, but it's important to get the context because yeah, your identity is how you interact with the world. It's how you behave. It's what you do. It's very close to your mindset. And so if I believe that I am this person and this is how I act and this is what I do, you're going to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect point where like so many people try to do like affirmations of like, I'm just going to say this thing enough
Mhm.
times that eventually I'm going to believe it. But if you have this underlying story that is the complete opposite of the affirmation, just use the example of like a lot of people use affirmations of trying to call in abundance. And like, if you
Yep.
want to call in abundance, you want to call in money, the new job, abundance of a relationship, whatever abundance means to you, but you have this underlying story that says you're not worthy, or says that you'll always be poor, or says that you've never had money before, why should you have money now? You can say that as many times as you possibly want, but that underlying story is so well believed by the body that it's not actually going to allow that affirmation to manifest for you the way that it should.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a really unique way of looking at affirmations as well. And so I'll start by piggybacking off of what you just shared, which is the two main problems that we've identified as far as why affirmations aren't working is simple. First one is that they're overly complicated. So they're long-winded. It's like if we use the abundance example, it's money is effortlessly flows to me because I am abundant and I am a money magnet and this is I am worthy, right? As one sentence. And that's the affirmation. So that's the first problem. It's very long, it's difficult to remember, and it's complicated, right? The second problem is they're not personal. So it's I just pulled this out of a book. I pulled this out of a meme that I liked. I pulled this out of, what I heard my spiritual mentor say, and it's not personal to you. It's not personal to your story. So the way we like to enlift that is first, we want affirmations to be short, sweet, and simple, like very direct, very clear, as little words as possible to convey the meaning. And the second thing is that we want them to be personalized. So what do we mean by personalized? I mean that we've got to go into the stories and we've got to look around and find the key sentence that's holding the whole story together. The real, like, sometimes it's the one that's like the most emotionalized, sometimes it's the one that is like the most celebrated if we're looking at like positive things that we've done, because this story work can go in both directions. It can go in the stuck, past, traumatic, like emotional moments, and it can also go to the positive version of that, which is like your greatest accomplishments in life, the things that you are most proud of, the great things that other people have said about you and done for you. And which, by the way, people don't look there. They never look there. They're only looking at the stuck shit. So to get yourself to focus on the wins is a huge deal in the from the get-go, because we never can. It's very difficult to give ourselves credit for the things we've done right. It's very difficult to celebrate ourselves for that. It's very difficult to then say, well, what did that mean about me? Oh, it means I'm smart and capable and confident. Right. So we ask that question, what does this mean about me? And then that's where we can pull affirmations from, because it's very personal to me. And then we can, what we call draft and craft, which is like, you write something in school and you got to write a draft, and then you get some edits, and then you go back and you make it tighter and you make it better, you make it more direct. So we look at those affirmations, and instead of saying, the money flows to me with ease and I'm abundant and I'm worthy, like as one sentence, we could we can look at maybe the time that we brought in our biggest client ever. And, I sold a 20K coaching package, which I've never done, but hey, like pretend I did. And if I go back and I say, oh, I sold this $20,000 coaching package, and we look at that story, we celebrate the story, we go through the process, and then we ask the question, what does that mean about me? And now I answer to create my own affirmation, which means like the answer could be, I'm expensive, right? Or like let's see, what else could I say? Like I deliver high quality results. Like my coaching is worth it. And those affirmations, those then we can say, well, that's personal to me because I've attached it to the feeling and to the story and to the scenario, got that proof, right? Because we're looking for evidence and we want the good evidence, not the bad evidence. And I can take that and I can attach it and I can say, okay, that's my affirmation, which is my coaching is worth it. And if I rep that and I say that where I mean it, and then I take a big breath in and I let that breath out and I rep it a few times, and I'm like, my coaching is worth it. And I play with the inflection and I play with the energy behind it. Now that's an affirmation I can work with. That's an affirmation I can use. That's an affirmation that's personal to me. And here's the tricky part about affirmations, which people don't realize. Most people don't realize everything is an affirmation. So, quite literally, everything is an affirmation. I'm not good enough is an affirmation. Okay. And let that blow your mind for a second, because I'm never gonna get this right. That's an affirmation, because everything you say is affirming that thing to be true, even if it's the wrong thing, even if it's a negative thing, even if it's a thing you don't want to affirm, you're affirming it. So you want positive affirmations. You want affirmations that point and prime your attention in the direction you want to go and reinforce the identity that you're trying to build. And be careful, because everything is an affirmation. So just note.
It's a reason it's called spelling.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is the stuff that we teach in depth, and like it's really fun to share it, because again, it's like the things that the common phrases and words and things that we hear from people that are working in personal development, that are working in personal growth, it's many times lacking context of how to make this personal for me, how to take this and apply this and integrate it in my own life. And it, like it's not rocket science. To quote Mark England, he literally says it all the time. He's like, it's not rocket science. But the truth is it is difficult to identify and locate and understand. And then once you're aware of it and once you can see it, it's like, oh, right. But it's not difficult, but it is not obvious. So
Mm.
it's, being able to interact and understand the impact of the language takes the willingness to learn, takes the willingness to practice it, takes the willingness to think a little differently than what you may have thought before. And once you open up that can of worms, good luck. Good luck, because it's gonna open you up to, it's not even good luck. That's not the right way to say it. It's like congratulations when you open up that can of worms, because it's gonna start to shift things within you and under perspectives and understandings that you won't know until you go until you go there, and you will know when you go there.
And once you know, you know. There's no unknowing it
Right.
once you have that awareness. And that
Right.
was something that
It's permanent.
I've started to recognize, is that ever since I learned about soft talk from your guys' workshop, I hear it all the time from people I interact
Yeah.
with, from stuff on social media and TV. And it really does, like, I really wanna hammer this home for the listeners of how important it is to be aware of the words that you use. But not just the words that you use yourself, the words that you are listening to in music, the words that you are listening to in TV shows, everything that you absorb. I mean, the cells in your body are just like Alexa and Siri. They're always listening. They're always waiting for that
Yes.
command of what should I do next? And they're always replicating. They're
Yeah.
always creating new. Like every 7 years, every single cell in our body has completely regenerated itself. So if you change your mindset, if you change your diet, if you change your habits, well, in 7 years, you literally will have a completely different body than you did if you didn't change those things. Now, if you don't change anything, your body's going to keep replicating itself down the same path that you were doing. So if you're eating shitty, if you're using shitty words, if you're not keeping yourself hydrated enough, if you're not working out, if you're not doing mindfulness practices, if you're not doing the things that are going to help you grow and help you improve, your body is going to continue to decline. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't have enough personal awareness around, because it's always comparing ourselves to others and seeing people. And I ran into somebody recently that I went to high school with, and they're like, "Man, you look exactly the same way that you did in high school." And yet I'm 20 years older than I did when I graduated. But it's because I have made these changes. I have changed my diet from the way that it was in high school. I've changed the fact that I no longer consume alcohol and cannabis the same way that I used to. I work out regularly. I am in a relationship that's not toxic. I am constantly doing things to try and continue to evolve as a human being. And that is become very apparent in my physical body and how it represents itself in this world.
Yes. Yes. And one thing that is important to note is like we were never taught any of this. So it's not
Right.
your fault that you don't know or that you never knew or that this is the first time you're hearing it or you're just starting to collect this information. I would argue that again, back to that universal they don't want you to know this information. And who's they? If I'm going to be completely candid and honest, it's the government, it's the school system, it's the corporations that are out to get all of your money, it is the people that are trying to utilize you to make money, right? So the thing is that you might not know about how language influences you. You may not know about how what you learned in school influences you. You may not know about how the food you eat influences you. You may not know about how tap water influences you and how pharmaceuticals influence you and how the news influences you. But I guarantee that every single person at the head of all of those things know exactly how it influences you. And the reality is they're manipulating to get the result and the outcome that they want. And so a lot of what I talk about in the context of like, this is where my personal and professional skill set align, which is that like I'm not directly teaching people how to dismantle the victim mentality on CNN, but the reality is that if you learn these tools and you learn these skill sets and you start to get objective about what's going on in the world around you and you start to say, hey, that just doesn't, it never sat right with me before and I just didn't know why, but when I go back and I listen to it now, like go listen to the news and hear all of the fear mongering and all of the like projection that's out there, all of the manipulation, the catastrophizing, the negations, all of the things that they're using to try to get you to think and feel a certain way. They know exactly what they're doing, right? They know exactly what they were doing when, throughout the last 3 years of the world. Everybody who's in the place of power knows what they're doing. And whether you want to believe that or not, like it's the truth. It's my truth. And so the thing is like, how can I be the most resilient, the most sovereign human being that I can be? Well, it goes with taking control of all those things. And the reality of like, how do I do that starts with the internal dialogue. Because if you are unhappy with being overweight, if you're unhappy with feeling depressed, if you're unhappy with feeling anxious, if you realize like my life is not as fulfilling as it could be, if you realize like that, wow, like I'm looking around at other people and they seem to have some things, some answers that I don't have, start to ask them and get curious. And yes, of course, when we look in the 3D realm, like food, water, movement, breath, all super important. Relationships, community, all super important. When we start to look at what I'll call higher realms of consciousness and awareness and how I'm interacting and behaving in this world, now I have to build a spiritual connection for myself. I've got to think and I've got to ask deeper questions about why I'm here and what my purpose is and how I can feel fulfilled and what are the things that light me up and what makes me feel really good. And you'll start to get curious and you'll realize, I mean, as most people do, that all the things that mainstream consumerism and capitalism want you to think are going to make you feel good are actually very detrimental to what it is that allows you to feel good. And so the only way in my book to be able to even start to understand that is through the lens of curiosity and through the lens of being objective, observing the story rather than believing the story. And we talk about that in coaching, which is that your clients will come to you and they'll tell you their story. And as a coach, you cannot believe them. Right. Because if you believe them, then you're just, oh, okay, well, that's the way it is. It's no, no, no. Observe their story, observe what they're saying, get some space, get some objectivity and say like, okay, well, is that true? Is that accurate? How can we help you? How can we change some of the words? And guess what? You get to do that in your day-to-day life too, is like observe the mainstream story, observe the narrative, and then get curious and say, I don't know. That doesn't feel right to me. I don't think that's true. That's counter to what I am experiencing over here, what I'm observing in this day to day. Right. And so the language patterns that we look at, the breathing patterns, if you have control over your own thoughts, which is what Enlifted will teach you to do, is have true control and sovereignty over your thoughts, and you understand how your breathing impacts the emotional responses in your life, navigating the world is going to be infinitely easier, let alone your coaching sessions. So not, like clearly I've outed myself as being a conspiracy theorist, AKA what means the word conspiracy means to breathe together. So we can go down that rabbit hole too. But the idea is like, the truth is like being able to have autonomy in your mind, being able to understand and scrutinize your thoughts and recognize how that's showing up where others are projecting onto you is critical if you want to have sovereignty in your life and if you want to feel really good and you want to feel in control. So, you know, mindset, yes. And if we go into that deeper why, the reason why this is important to me is because I want my optimal health. I want my optimal well-being. I want optimal relationships. I want to feel fulfilled and satisfied in my human, and I want to connect with others, and I want to feel free to do that. And so disraveling, unraveling, um, dismantling, that's the word I'm looking for, the constructs of the way that society has positioned us for a long time is essential to that in my life. And this tool set has been one of the most phenomenal things to help me really align with my own truth.
Kimberly, thank you so much for taking us down that rabbit hole there, because I think it is really important for people to have that awareness around the fact that everything that is within our reality that comes from the mainstream paradigm isn't in our best interest. It is in the best interest of the people who are running the show and making the money. And if you don't believe that to be true, let's just take an avenue down marketing really quick. What are the two colors that we recognize the most? Like if you look at the full spectrum of the rainbow, the colors that are going to pop out to you the fastest, red and yellow. And we'll just talk about red here really quick. So think about McDonald's, Arby's, Jack in the Box,
Burger
whatever
King.
other numerous are there. What is the main color of their logo? It's red. And what does a stoplight or a stop sign tell you that is red? To stop. So literally within the marketing of those fast food restaurants, or even go as far as like Target, a red
Mhm.
logo, big red all over the building, that's telling you to stop, that's telling you to come here, that is constantly grabbing your attention as you drive down the road. And what I find interesting, there's one place in the world where McDonald's logo is not red, and that's in Sedona, Arizona, because they have this underlying color theme of teal and the kind of like red of the
Oh my
rocks of
god, you're
Sedona.
right.
Well, guess what? When I drove through to Sedona the last 2 times, there was never more than a couple of cars at McDonald's because you drove
Wow,
right
that's very
past
interesting.
it. You didn't recognize the McDonald's logo because it was teal or turquoise or whatever the color is that Sedona uses. So it truly is fascinating that these marketing aspects are picked psychologically. They are picked based upon how it's going to
Yeah.
keep our attention the absolute most. So again, if you don't believe it, begin to expand your awareness, begin to look around yourself and start to recognize those subtle things, because even though they're subtle, they're not subtle once you begin to understand and
Yeah.
have that awareness around it.
Yeah, absolutely. What comes to mind is two good friends of mine host a podcast called Serious Fun. And shout out to Brooks and Dave. And they've done it is a phenomenal listen. I highly recommend it to people because it's especially if you like the conversation we're having here, go listen to it. The first episode they talk about is about nudging and priming. So what that is in marketing, right? We can use like I'm going to take these marketing principles and apply it to your own life and in the things that you care about, right? So nudging and priming, which is ultimately like preparing people to make a decision, right? So putting them repeat exposure to a certain thing that predisposes them to a certain outcome, action, or behavior. And we can use that for ourselves, right? We can nudge and prime ourselves. So if I took you out here to my kitchen, on my refrigerator is a list of my goals. There's also like I use visual cues of things that I want to integrate and apply into my life. And the reality is like your subconscious is always picking that up. And so in the relation to how do I get shit done? How do I check goals off my list? How do I make this happen? How do I bring this into my reality? You can use those same techniques. You can prime yourself. And so we talk about this in goal setting because most people, right, like they want to set a goal, like about all these things they want to do and they never write it down. So it always lives in their head, this big image of all the things I want, all the dreams that I have in my life. And then you can make a massive step forward if you write those goals down because most people never write a goal down. They just have the dream in their head and it exists only in their head and it does not come through into 3D reality. So first step, write it down. Second step, draft that thing, just like we talked about with the affirmations. Make it really clear, really succinct, and really accurate. Like, this is exactly what I want. And so, you can look at this as practices of manifestation. You can look at this as just getting clear and priming the action to take that you want to go to chip away, take action steps towards it. And the truth is it's the same exact thing that they're using in marketing or in that nudging component or the priming, which is to set yourself up to make that decision, set yourself up to take that action. And so I use this all the time in my own life. I write down my goals, I put them up where people can see them, I put them up where I can see them. I consistently look at them and revisit them. I keep them at the front of my brain because remember that reticular activating system that I talked about earlier, we want to work with that to our advantage. So if I can always put in front of my face, in my eyes, in my field of vision, in my awareness, the things that I want in my life, the things I want to go after, the things I want to cultivate, then I can use those same exact principles that McDonald's is using, that Pfizer is using, that the government is using to put into my field the things I want to see. And you can do that two ways. You can do that by like writing your own stuff and putting it down, or you can do it by filtering information out. So I highly recommend that you stop watching the news or that you watch news that aligns with what your values are and that you start to curate your Instagram feed, you start to curate your YouTube, you start to curate your friend group, your environment, because all of those things influence that behavior in the same way that the marketing principles are working. And so like a lot of what, you'll hear people say you're the 5 people you spend time around. I believe that's true, right? Because you're just
Mhm.
reinforcing the same experience. You're also like the environment that you live in. You're also like your Instagram feed is highly influencing you. Your YouTube algorithm is highly influencing you. The email newsletters that you sign up are highly influencing you. And so what I think about as I am a marketer, right? Like I have something to sell. I use Instagram, I use YouTube, I use our email list to make offers to our people who have raised their hand and said, "Hey, I want to learn this." And so I know these things from a perspective of that, but I'm like doing it with good intentions. And so,
Mm.
like when you work with people, if they have good intentions, if their values align with yours, if the vibe, if the feeling is right. And when you find those things that you resonate with, whether you know why or not is not important, but it's putting those in your direct field of awareness. It's making the connections. It's listening to the podcasts. It's going down the rabbit holes, asking the questions, and then really understanding like your own internal dialogue, how that's influencing the discussion. Because if you could just go and you believe everything you hear, even the own thoughts that originate in your own head, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Like there's the ability to observe, right? It can be your own clients, it could be your own stories, it can be the stories that are portrayed to you in the media. Observing is about just seeing, noticing, and then saying, do I want to accept that? Do I think that's the most accurate? Do I think that that's most true? Is that how I want to live my life? It's like if you want to model, like you get to choose who you model your life after, or you get to choose how to make it up yourself. The thing is like, you got to know that you can. You got to know that you do choose that. So look for the people and the places and the things that are getting the results that you want. Look at the outcomes and see where can I get that? It's like bring it back to McDonald's. If you walk in and you realize everybody who's working there is overweight and is not very happy, and then you look around in the actual restaurant and you see the same thing, it's like, well, is this really the place I want to be? Is this really the food I want to be eating? And unfortunately, for many people, like that critical thinking doesn't even exist. Why? Because they have fallen into the we'll call it the matrix, we'll call it the mainstream, whatever. It's like you're falling into this thought patterns exactly how they want you to, behaving exactly how they want you to, doing exactly what they want you to. So instead of that universal they, which we could name and we could put point, whatever, it's like, what do I want? How do I want to behave? How do I want to act? How do I want to show up in my life? And then seek mentors and guides and people that are doing it, because you can literally create anything you want in your life. We go back to the abracadabra, with my word I create. You can have anything you want. You can do anything you want. There are no rules. Like there's much less rules than we think. so so what rules do you want to play by? How do you want to play your game? And that's something that like I'm constantly exploring for myself. I still don't believe everything I hear, even that comes out of my own mouth. I'm constantly observing and constantly thinking like, is that really like is that really how I want this to go? And so it's a skill that you can just develop over, that flex the muscle, try it out, make some mistakes, redirect, change a few other words, change a few other stories, and see what happens and have more fun playing with it rather than it being heavy or hard or difficult or in that victim mentality. Because we could easily say that we're victims to the mainstream. We could easily say that we're victims to the media. We could easily say we're victims to, the big corporations. And we only are if we believe that we are.
Yeah. Well, and it's also if that was true with a capital T, then there wouldn't be independently successful people. There wouldn't be people that are creating the
Right.
life that they want to live based upon their own belief systems, that their own wants and desires. If that was true, I wouldn't be able to work a job remotely and live a life that I want to live, whether that be in a school bus or regular home or however. But I chose to follow my own path and listen to what my wife and I actually wanted out of life, and then made the decisions to, okay, are there other people doing this? Does that give me something to
Mhm.
model off of? Yes, okay, you look at Instagram and YouTube and there's a plethora of people that are doing it as well. Okay, so if they can do it, then I can do it too. It doesn't have to look exactly the same way. It instead can look in the way that I want it to look, because I have different tastes and wants and desires, and that's great. So it's trying to discern between what is truth with a capital T or what is truth with a little t. And if it's a little t, then okay, what part of that truth resonates with you? And then whatever else doesn't resonate with you, let it go on the wayside. Like I say it on the podcast all the time, like what I say may not be your truth, and you don't have to agree with everything that I have to say. But if there's something that I say that makes you be like, I've never really thought about it that way. Okay, then that's an opportunity for you kind of to dive into that and see, is there a paradigm shift that needs to happen based upon that new information, but also recognizing that we're forever the student, never the master. So it's always being
Yes.
open to changing when we need to change. I mean, I said when my wife and I moved into our school bus and we were probably like 6 months on the road, totally still in the honeymoon phase of living in the bus, of like, I'm never going to live in a regular home again. I'm always going to be a nomad and I'm always going to live this way. Well, here it is 4.5 years later, and I'm living in a regular home again. I still have the bus. We're still going to move back into the bus and hit the road again in the fall, but it's still being open to recognize that, okay, maybe now is a time to take a pause. It's time to explore the East Coast in which I wasn't born and raised in. I get to meet a lot of really cool people, see a lot of new things that I never would have seen if I wasn't open to the possibility of life being able to be different.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the main thing that really, like, the biggest lesson in learning in my own life was because before I went down the path of coaching and before I got into, running an online business and really following what was true for me and recognizing and breaking out of the the programming and the stories and the beliefs that I had growing up, it was incredibly uncomfortable. Like, it's very challenging. It's like it's disorienting. It's like, "What the hell?" You know? And nothing is how I believed it to be. Nothing it feels true to me anymore about this. And a lot of the lessons and the learnings and the unlearnings, both directions that I went through were incredibly uncomfortable. And it's challenging because it's so disorienting sometimes to realize, like, wow, I've believed this, that I've always played by these set of rules, and those are just not it. And this is where it goes into that idea of being able to integrate and change and update the software, right? Change the stories and be unattached to what you used to believe because you didn't know any better. And so I bring it back to that thing of like, it's not your fault if this is the first time you're hearing this. It's not your fault if you like didn't know this before. It's not your fault if you're still not getting it. Like it will come to you when you're ready to learn it, and it will make sense. It will make perfect sense when the message is received. And when uh people talk about a great awakening or like whatever. Okay, cool. That's the most disorienting part of your life. Like it just is, because everything that you thought was happening and it was right. It's like you're like, I don't even know what to do anymore. And it's uncomfortable, it's disorienting, it's all those things. And how do I re-architect from there? How do I build back up from there? And I'm not talking build back better. I'm talking about like, no, like build forward best. Okay. Like how do I build forward to get what I want? And you can choose, like you can always choose. And it's, do I have the right tools to be able to craft that story? And sometimes like I really, when I, get really out into this like totally philosophical land and the deep thinking, I'm like, oh, it really is that simple. I can literally write whatever story I want. It really is that simple. Like I could just pick up a piece of paper right now and write, this is the story of the life I want to live. And then guess what? Like I could actually go do it. And the reason people don't, what is the reason people don't? Because they never think to write the story down. And then even if they do think to write the story down, the other stories that they're carrying from the years and years and years of life before them are preventing them to stepping in and taking action. So it's, how do I dismantle those stories? How do I get objective and clear? How do I observe those stories? And then how do I write a new one? And that's the core of what we teach with Enlifted. That's the core of what mindset work really is. And if you think that doing all the mental gymnastics is what does it, it's not. That's the thing that primes the brain to then go out and take action and put you in position to be action prone. And so really what you want when you're talking about mindset is, I want to shift up the stuff up here in my head to be able to go out into the world and do and take action. And so if, you're still too in the land of the ether and thinking in the air realm up here in the head, that, to my knowledge, does not work exclusively, right? I do need to take action in the physical 3D realm. And so maybe I haven't transcended far enough. I don't know, right? Maybe I haven't taken enough psychedelics. Maybe I haven't done enough meditation. Maybe I haven't really unlocked all the power of the quantum. Whatever, right? Like it's like these ways of getting out and doing things like in the human sense is words to reality. There's a step in between, which is action. So it's words to create action, to push me into action to create the reality. And that's where like I've been able to move through the discomfort. That's where I've been able to reorient after the disorienting aspects of the awakenings, and then say, okay, like I'm believing this part. I believe these are true. These are the actions I'm going to take. And then when I take these actions, this is the result that I get. So, the great joys of contemplating human existence and how our mental realm interacts with our physical and our spiritual and our emotional and all of that. Like, I don't have all of the answers, but I do have one piece of the puzzle: words and breath.
It's so funny when you were talking about like that great awakening, it really made me kind of think back to, like, for me, if I really try to break it down, like, what did it mean to go through a spiritual awakening? It was recognizing that I was living a life for other people. I wasn't living a life for myself.
Yes.
And my own personal
Yes.
truth is that's truly what it means to become awakened, is to recognize that we're here to live life for us. That's why we are the unique expression of the universe that each and every one of us is. None of us are created equal. We may have a lot of similarities with other people, like one of the Enlifted coaches, Ryan Sprague, who is on the podcast, who put me in touch with you, Kimberly, is like, him and I jive a lot. Like, we have a lot of very commonalities, but yet we physically look different. He is significantly taller than I am. He's got red hair. I've got brown hair. We live in different geographical locations. Like, we're not the same person, even though there are expressions of us that are similar. We all have a unique voice. We all have a unique life that we are meant to live. And if you're not living life for you, that's the invitation that a spiritual awakening offers. It's not about in my opinion, like kind of you brought up, of maybe you're not enlightened enough or have transcended enough. Like, that's not what the spiritual awakening's about. It's not about becoming the next Christ or Buddha or some ascendant master that's going to be here on the planet to change everybody's lives. And for me, that's the true meaning of being a coach, is to helping people come back to who they are. How do you actually want to show up in the world? How do you actually want to live life? Forget your parents, forget society, forget your friends, forget what everybody else has told you. What do you actually want? That, to me, is the true fundamental question that we all should be asking ourselves in every single moment. Because if you're doing something that you don't actually want to do, then what do you want to do? How can you create clarity around that? How can you now begin to restructure the words that you use to give you that emphasis to start creating action to help move you towards that? And one of the things that you mentioned really made me think of some of the statistics that you guys gave in the workshop, where we remember 30% of what we hear, we remember 50% of what we write, and we remember 80% of what we teach. And I would also kind of change that a little bit to we remember 80% of what we live. Because once
Yeah.
we start to actually
Yeah.
integrate those things that we've heard, that we've written down and taken notes for, once we actually live it, that's why we remember it that much more, because we have true, actual experience based upon that, that tells ourselves that, hey, this is true because you've lived it.
Yeah, it's interesting in that I think a lot of where people end up in coaching is, to teach mostly. And the only way to be taken seriously about what you teach is for you to also live it. Right.
Yeah.
Because if I'll use again the health coach example, like if I decided I wanted to be a health coach and I'm teaching you all about what foods to eat and how to move your body and what to do to optimize your health, and yet I am eating at McDonald's and I'd never work out and I drink soda every day, like, then why would you trust me? Like, you would see that my actions don't align with my words. And so I'm out of integrity, and I'm not I can preach all day, but I'm not doing it. So, like, the likelihood of you believing me is little, and the likelihood of someone following me is very little. By the flip of the coin, something that I've picked up in my life recently, which is that I'm not actively coaching anyone. I host a podcast. I work alongside of Mark in our coaching certification, helping people like go through the process and really more from a logistics standpoint. I don't teach modules in the course. I'm very much a support element. But the truth is that why do people believe me? Why do people want to do the things that I suggest, and why are they attracted to that, is because I literally live it. So when I share my life, I use my own personal Instagram as a personal blog. I don't use it to sell. I don't use it to market. I'm just sharing my life. And maybe that is selling and marketing because people want the life that I live or they want something similar. And the truth of the matter is like it's funny. One of my girlfriends sent me this morning a screenshot of messages that we were exchanging. We met as coworkers in my corporate job before getting into coaching, and my story in that phase of my life is very like, one, somewhat radical, but then two is very like people looked at me with awe. They were like, "How are you doing this? You're so bold. You're so confident. Like, what the hell?" I left a six-figure job in New York City to completely quit on a dime to start health coaching, be an entrepreneur, and pursue what was in alignment for me. People thought I was nuts. And so my friend sent me this screenshot of messages that we had I didn't even know how she found them. I have no idea. I didn't even ask. And it's like meets, and literally the line is actually, I'll pull it up right now and read it to you guys verbatim because words, right? I said, "It all comes down to the fact that I don't want to waste my life sitting in this office, and I'm not going to spend my life doing meaningless shit when I can actually impact people and be happier." So I can enlift that right here, right now, and say that it all comes down to the fact that I want to enjoy my life and I want to be out in the world and I want to spend my life doing meaningful work. And so the thing is like I had that understanding, I had that passion, I had that desire and that drive. And so I made bold action and took bold leaps because it was what was going to get me the result that I wanted. If I listened to everybody else that thought I was crazy, if I really anchored into the reality that I was living in and believed it all to be true, I would still be sitting in a cubicle in Manhattan. Like, I wouldn't be doing any of the things I'm doing. And so the choice to step in and to live the life is what has to come first, because you can't teach from something you haven't lived. Like this is another great example of why we structure our coaching certification the way we do. We actually start with the personal work. You have to work on your stories first before we teach you how to coach it. Why? Because same reason that if you were a personal trainer and you've never lifted weights before, how are you going to teach somebody else how to do it? If you are like if you are teaching people how to play guitar and you've never played a guitar before, how are you going to do that? You have to
Yeah.
live it first and be that like beacon of light that shows, like, hold the torch for other people. This is what's possible. Be the permission slip and boldly go after what you want, because that like every coach that's out there teaching something, I truly believe is because it radically changed their life and they want to gift that to somebody else. So live it first, teach it second, and it'll be a symbiotic relationship because it will in fact support each side. Every time I do a podcast and I'm maybe, yeah, okay, fine, this is classified as me teaching, it reinforces what I live, and then my lived experience reinforces what I teach. So it's like completely intertwined and interrelated. And I love that you say it that way, because it's really like, to be a leader and to lead with integrity requires that you go first.
Yeah. It's like Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to go for it. I've been on this kick recently, or the past couple of days, is like talking about you have to go for it. And have to is pressure language, and I'm using it anyway. You have to go for it. And if you want something to change, you have to do something different, and it's accurate to say that you have to. Things are not going to just show up at your doorstep and say, "Oh, I heard you were dreaming about this and here you go." That's not how it works. It's action first. It's making the bold moves, it's the going for it energy, it's committing to that path, it's continuously, effortlessly, and like, not effortlessly, continuously with effort, going after the thing you want and keeping that vision in your head and taking bold aligned action towards the goal. And to take out the aligned action part, which can feel frou-frou, it's like literally like write the goal, write the action steps, do the action steps, even when it feels scary, even when it feels uncomfortable. And then that's where you're going to get the change and the transformation. And having a skill set to support that identity, right, in your own head, how you view yourself, your mindset, being able to do that clearly is going to set you up for success to take those actions and make you action prone. And so at the end of the day, like, that's what every coach wants to do for their client, is set them up to be action prone, set them up with a new identity, create a transformation. And that's what every person wants to do within themselves, to be able to really, really, really live a life that's fulfilling and satisfying. And so, what bold actions can you take? What things can you go for? How can you set yourself up to go for it? And then trust that, like everybody wants to think about worst case scenarios. What about best case scenarios?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like recently, we had Ryan's girlfriend Rachel on the show, who you guys
She's
work
my
pretty
bestie.
closely with. And, she was talking about the saying that you guys use of what if the good shit? Like instead of
Yeah.
always focusing on like, okay, all the bad things that could happen, like what if this, what if this, what if this, what if this? And like I was on that train for a really long time. Like I am also a very deep thinker. And the downside to a deep thinker is you can think about a lot of bad shit and how things can go wrong.
Mhm.
But restructuring that to
And you
think
can get
of
stuck in things.
what if the good shit, like, okay, what if you quit your job and and immediately after quitting that job that you hate, that you loathe going to every day, the opportunity for you to do something that you truly love presents itself. And then what if you choose to do that and all of a sudden you make more money than you were making at your previous job and actually have more time and have to work less? And what if then you can take the vacation that you've always wanted to go on? And then what if then you can buy all of the things that you've always wanted to buy and, dress the way that you've always wanted to dress or drive the car that you've always wanted to drive? Like, again, the rabbit hole of which you can start to go down of taking more of that positive route in the what ifs instead of the negative route in the what ifs takes us back to it's all the structuring on the words that we use and the stories that we choose to tell ourselves, which will then yield a very specific result based upon the energetics of that story.
Yep. Yeah, I love What If the Good Shit. It's my favorite, and it's like the going back to me talking about, like, the priming and putting my goals up on my fridge, that's how my goals started. They're scary to me. Like, they're things that expand me, they're scary to me, they're things that I'm like, "Oh god, crap," and I most of the time, I start them with the what if, right? And one of them is, like, what if I grow, Get Enlifted to the number 1 podcast on iTunes? And the thought of that is like, well, of course I want that. Like, I'm putting in the work for the show and I'm showing up like and putting my best foot forward into it. And I really want to reach as many people as I can. And I want people to have these tools. And like that sounds great to me. And then my imposter voice or the voice in the back of my head is like, you can't do that. You're not good enough at that. Why would anybody want to listen to you? What makes you think that you could beat Andrew Huberman? Like it's like whatever, right? And so the thing is that like I can hear those voices and so I could stop myself from ever writing it down. But when I write down what if I'm the number 1 podcast on iTunes, then I put into my head like, well, what if? Like what would that look like? What would that be like? What would it feel like? What would it bring me? What would it bring to the people who listen? What value would it bring to the world? Who would I have to be to become that? And so I socialize the idea first. I think about what if, and then when I go from what if and to make it into a statement, now I can make it into a statement. I can set it as a goal. And then some really next level shit is you past tense it and you say I already did it. And then now you're stepping into that identity of the person who can do it, who is going to do it. And by any means, am I good enough right now, like to make that happen? Well, I'm good enough. Am I going to continue to take the action towards it? Yeah, because I'm priming myself for it. I'm putting myself in that position, and I'm unattached to the outcome. It's the desire that I have. It's the goal that I have. It's a feeling that I have, and I want to do. And it's a constant reminder of what I have to do to step in and expand myself. It's quite literally exactly what your name of your show, the Embrace and
Yeah.
Expand. Like I am going to embrace that this is what I want and I'm going to expand myself into it. And it's okay if I change my mind at some point in the process. I have goals that I've set in the past that I no longer feel resonant with and I'm okay to let them go because I evolved and my experience evolved and I got new information. And so if next year maybe I won't care about this and maybe I will and maybe I'll have done it and maybe I'll have done it and I'll realize that it wasn't important to me. I don't know. Like I'm not sure what's going to happen. I can't predict it, but I know that like it's something that I when I said it that I wanted it and it felt like a yes and then it was like okay, this is something to work for and I a bigger part of me understands what's going on here more so than my immediate reality and so I'm going to step into it and I'm going to do the actions and I'm going to set myself up to make it a possibility and let Jesus take the wheel or whoever's driving the car. I don't know. I
Mm.
think it's me, but Jesus sounds cool.
Oh, so many good things. And I think you just bringing up embrace and expand is giving the perfect segue to ask you the embrace and expand question of Kimberly, what did you have to embrace in your life in order to expand into the person you are today?
I have a lot of answers to this, and I had to embrace myself, right? Like my big
Mm.
dreams, my goals, my imagination, my pleasure, my desires. Like I've and I am constantly working on embracing that, because when I really really get still and I get quiet and I feel and I hear who I am and what I am and I listen to my intuition and I allow my desires and what brings me pleasure and joy and happiness and satisfaction, and when I really let that come through, it's like, how could I not chase that? How could I not expand into that? Like it's too clear to me what's on, like why I want it. And so being able to embrace those desires, embrace the thing that I really want in my life, and then say, okay, how can I expand into it to get it? How can I, like go for this? How can I build the skills? How can I show up differently? How can I show up more confidently? How can I step into that? And it's really the truth is how uncomfortable am I willing to get to go and get the thing and to go for it? And most of the time, the more uncomfortable I get, the bigger the reward, the bigger the pleasure, the bigger the like satisfaction. Because when you get there, it's like, oh, this was so worth it. And it's so good. And it just is a loop that keeps playing, because with each level comes a new desire, a new thing you want, a new feeling that you're chasing. And it's like, okay, cool. I've done this before. Let me go for it again. Let me get uncomfortable again. And that's the stage of my life I'm in right now. And really like embracing that is like, I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable in everything. Like, I'm like, oh man, like this is, and in a good way, not in a bad way, in a good way. Like I'm pushing all of my edges and saying, like, okay, this is the thing I want. Okay, let me go take some action over here. Oh, this other thing that I want. Cool. All right. This is scary as hell to send this message. I'm going to send it. Oh, okay. Like I got to show up and do this thing and speak confidently. Oh man, I'm not feeling it today. I'm going to do it. Like it's like pushing the energy in the direction and the lanes you want to go, and just embracing that discomfort that comes alongside of all the desires that you're going for, and then being able to say like, okay, I'm in it and I'm doing it, and like, hang on, buckle up, buttercup, like it's time to go. So
Yeah.
I think like a lot of that experience in my life is like repping the discomfort and repping the like understanding what comes on the other side of that has been the thing that when I look back from like the first moments when I started to wake up, when the first moments when I started to say I can live my life how I want to live, it's been a series of uncomfortable to comfortable to then realizing that comfortable is uncomfortable, and then you shift again. And so it's like follow the desire first and foremost, embrace the discomfort, and then step into that new identity, expand your identity into the person who can do it.
Mm. Such a great answer. And would you also agree that if the thing that you want to do or the goal that you have doesn't make you feel uncomfortable or doesn't make you afraid, it's not big enough?
Yes, and with an asterisk, because I believe that we all play at the level that we want to play at.
Mhm.
And I want to play at a big level. Adam, you want to play at a big level because you're
Yeah.
here having this conversation. And some people are okay playing at a level that is comfortable. And so, do I think everybody needs to push themselves to that like high achiever top 1%, like, no, because maybe that isn't what you want. And so I want people to think about the goals and the things that they set as being the thing that's going to bring them the most joy. And that's why I say like follow the desire, follow where your pleasure is, because for some people it may be what is, you know, it's not going to require as much uncomfortable, right? So it's like be honest with yourself, and if you want that level, if you want that like eliteness, in your life, or you want that like big expansive energy, then yeah, you've got to set big, super uncomfortable goals. And if you like, and I don't want to use the word mediocre, that's not where I'm going for, but something similar to that, which is like if you want what feels stable and secure and like you truly want that, then maybe getting uncomfortable is you only need like 5% discomfort. Whereas like if you want to beat Andrew Huberman, you're going to have to go 100% discomfort. I don't know. I'm not trying to beat Andrew Huberman. I love you, Andrew. Like it's just like it's like this thing, right? It's like how uncomfortable are you going to get to that elite level and ask an elite athlete, right? That's really freaking uncomfortable and it hurts. It's challenging, right? And not everybody wants to be the Olympian. Some people want to be the little league coach, and that's cool. So I look at it and I think like to put pressure on making your goals uncomfortable or and like forcing yourself to strive for more than what you really want is unnecessary. And if you want to go big, you've got to go big. So that's going to require like, everything's relative. So it's like I think about some of my friends that are very, very, very happy and fulfilled and satisfied and would never want to do the things I do. And so like I wouldn't ask them to. And then I think about people who are ahead of me doing the things that I really want to do and I look at it and I'm like, okay, all right, that's going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to go for it. And so it's yes and. It's yes and with an asterisk of like you can have big goals and you can get uncomfortable if you want.
I love it. I love it. That's a perfect answer and kind of the avenue I figured you were going to take. Um, and I think it just goes to show the level of integrity that you have within your work of being able to meet people where they are and where they want to go and not pressuring them to go beyond that. Like if you're okay working a job for somebody else and you don't want to be your own boss, or you're okay always living in the same town and you don't have any interest in traveling, like that's totally fine. I think it's important though for us to find what lights us up, what makes us truly
Yeah.
feel, like you said, happy, fulfilled, meeting all of your desires and wants and needs, no matter how big or small they may be.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. And yeah, the we set our expectations for ourselves and it's important to remember that. And set the expectations that you want to live into and hold the expectations that you want to live into and you'll get them.
Mm, phenomenal. Well, Kimberly, what's one last piece of advice that you would give to our listeners if they really enjoyed what you had to say and are willing to put in some work around maybe shifting their stories within their life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll point you to our podcast, which is called Get Enlifted. That's the name of the show. And we have within that one show, we have a few different types of podcast episodes. And the best place to start is back at episode 1, Learn the Magic Words. These are short mini episodes called Enlifted Essentials. There's about 20 of them. There's like 11 in the beginning and then another chunk of them in the middle of the podcast, like if you're looking chronologically. And those are bite size tools of the Enlifted method. So you can learn the foundations of what we're talking about here today and start to play with integrating those things in your life. So you'll learn about why language influences you, how language influences you. You'll learn what words to use more of and why, what words to use less of and why. And then you'll learn about those things that we talked about, the reticular activating system, the victim mentality, the imposter syndrome, what if the good shit is one of them, and they're short and they're sweet. So what I like about them is that you can listen to one, take some notes, and then practice it that day. You'll learn about soft talk. That was the key. We brought it up and we like glazed over it, but that's really important, and that's like the place I recommend that people start when they really want to practice learning and observing their words. And so those short mini episodes will teach you a lot. and it's a minimum investment of your time. So go check them out. Enlifted Essentials on the Get Enlifted podcast. If you want to talk to me about it, you can message me on Instagram at Kimberly.Kesting, and I'll send you the links. I'll send you the playlist. I'll tell you more about whatever, like I'm super friendly on Instagram. I'm a real human. I want to talk to you. And yeah, there's a lot of really cool content that I can share with you from Enlifted. And if you want to, connect with me personally, like I mentioned, my Instagram page is like my personal blog. You can see like how I live my life, what I'm doing, what I'm up to, and I'm always down for internet friends. So connect with me.
Wonderful. And as always, I'll have all of the contact information in the show notes below of where you can get in touch with Kimberly. I'll have a link to the podcast so you guys can find out there. I would highly, highly recommend giving those episodes a listen. They truly are very valuable just in the information that you can get. And remember, if you write it down, you have a 50% chance of remembering it versus a 30% chance if you only listen to it.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, we've toyed with the idea of like making worksheets to go along with those episodes, which I think we'll do later this year. And like we're always going to be releasing more and more of those tidbits. So it's like, grab what resonates right now, see what fits, play some of the language games, and then when you want more, come back for more. And when you want to go on the deep dive talking about water, we got episodes on that. You want to go on the deep dive talking about food, we've got episodes on that. You want to go on the deep dive down the rabbit hole of what the news is doing to you, we got episodes on that. Like we talk about all of these things in long form as well as those short mini episodes. So it's a fun thing. I love sharing on a podcast channel. I'm sure I know that you also love it too because you host one. And yeah, it's a great way for us to all share information and to have good conversations and create that sphere of influence that we're talking about that's so important. So choose who you listen to wisely. And if it's me, I'm honored. Thank you.
Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for
So
just
fun.
your wealth of information that you brought to this podcast and just sharing your perspective. The power in words and your breath really means a lot to me. And I can speak for myself and the listeners that we truly do thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. This is really fun.
Definitely. Well, thank you all for being here, listening to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. Again, I'll have all of the information in the show notes below of how you can get in touch with Kimberly and the Enlifted crew. And if you really enjoyed this episode, loved what we had to say, feel free to share this episode on whatever social platform that you are on. Share it with your family, share it with your friends, help spread the message. And I appreciate you being here. I'll catch you on the next one.